Neelkanth, starting with, I'll start with the thing that as the chief economist in Axis Bank, wearing that cap of yours, you talk to a lot of global investors, and you have laid out very clearly the opportunities, challenges, and things like that. What do you really tell them as the compelling reasons to come to India, and what do you hear from them as to why they want to come to India? Are they the same things, which is the demographic and the capital and the TFR, or do they think differently, or do you also talk to them differently?
No, in addition to the demographics, because everyone is clear that India is going through that phase where growth becomes a lot more predictable, and the more the predictability, the more the attractiveness of the market. But I think what India has really stood out on, and that's a point that I should have made while I was speaking, is macroeconomic stability. See, what you need when you are investing is certainty. Because see, anyway, investing is a very uncertain job, right? We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So if you can reduce the uncertainty, it helps bring in investors. So what India has started to do with controlling its fiscal deficit, building up a large pool of foreign currency reserves, is that now currency is among the most stable in the world. Inflation has come down, because compared to say what the US is at, where they're doing a lot of excessive fiscal spending, India, by being very, very constrained and doing fiscal consolidation as the economy has picked up, is actually making growth much more predictable. See, remember that we are growing at 7.5%, despite fiscal tightening, monetary tightening, slowing exports, higher global cost of capital. So despite all of that, we are growing well. And I think that gives a lot of comfort and confidence to global investors, that if despite these headwinds, these guys are growing at 7.5%, then the predictability of growth is much greater. So if you are investing for 5 years and you have a stable currency, you have stable exchange rates, and a reasonably predictable growth, that makes India very attractive.
Sure. And how do you sort of you talked about the inequality and stuff like that. How do you sort of deal? Do you expect because the big story in it is also the emerging middle class and the large consumption story. So do you expect it to come through a lot of trickle down, or do you expect a little bit more targeted action to get this consumption going? And I have a part 2 of the question, but I'll come to that.
Yeah, so and another aspect which, I just to add to the answer to the first one, and this will add to what's happening to the second one, is the entrepreneurs in India and the businesses in India. So compared to what you see in China or what you see in Brazil, you have a much more diverse set of businesses that you can invest in. And these businesses are run by people who understand how to scale, who are good at communication, who are building businesses the right way. And so investors don't just invest in the economy, right? So they invest in businesses. And I think that's great as well. So coming to the point that you are raising, and I think that's a very, very important policy challenge. I'm not sure what exactly the solution is. We'll have to sort of play it by the ear, as they say. But what gives me hope is that, very contrary to this point that some people make, that a few business groups are making all the investments,
right,
we're actually starting to see a much greater diversification. So, so now the unicorn story is, of course, somehow maligned, or at least has slowed down a bit. But even today, if you look at the market capitalization of unicorns in India as a percentage of listed company market capitalization, it is 2 to 3 times that of US and China.
Wow.
So when people say that capital is getting overly concentrated, that's not what data shows. You look at the share of market cap of the nifty companies in the overall market cap. You look at number of companies above $1 billion of market capitalization. Those numbers are telling you a very different story.
Yeah.
So to the extent possible, I think the worst type of capital concentration, where a few groups control everything. Now, you can see that some groups are investing a lot and they have a lot of capital in their hands. But at the same time, it is not that they are getting away scot-free. I mean, they have to compete for it.
Right.
And so that, I think, reduces some of the risk in the sense that you have this upturn in the stock market. If you have a good promise, you can get the capital.
Right.
There are now venture capitalists, angel investors, so businesses can grow. What we've also learned how to do is give capital at very small ticket sizes, both equity capital and debt capital. This is something that even developed economies have struggled with.
Yeah.
So, and they struggled with when they were growing, and which is why, they became a lot more unequal than perhaps they intended to, or anyone intended to. But if we sort of build on things like OCEN, that Open Credit Enhancement Network, account aggregator model, now that the ONDC is building a layer on top of it. So some Tat Sari producer in Purulia, in one of the poorest parts of West Bengal, if she is seeing good demand in Mumbai or Ahmedabad, and she says, oh, I need 50,000 rupees of loan because now the demand is so strong, I need some working capital to finance it. I think in some 11 minutes, 8 minutes or something like that, you can get a loan.
Wow. Yeah.
And if you can scale it up, if say ONDC can provide market access, which is ungated, not some 2 or 3 big marketplaces controlling it, but I think we can solve some of these problems.
True.
But at the same time, while I think the government intervention in terms of cash transfers is something that I don't necessarily agree with, but I think the government will have to intervene, and I think is intervening, and they'll have to ramp up a lot on that, on doing more to improve the micro infrastructure that households and workers access. So getting a pakka house, getting piped water access, getting more reliable electricity, getting funding for skilling, getting access to cheaper computing, getting access to cheap data. I think all of these things may require government intervention.
Sure. Quick thing on, and we've talked about it, Neelkanth, before, which is about the changing food consumption pattern and the need for agriculture to change in India. Can you just throw a quick light on that, some quick comments on that? Would be
no, it's a fascinating question, and it is remarkable how counterintuitive it can be. Right? If you see the household consumption expenditure survey, the 2022-23 survey, the per capita cereal demand has fallen by 15%.
Right.
In the last decade, India's aggregate demand for cereals directly consumed by humans has fallen. And production keeps going up. So this is where I think policy has a big role to play, wherein things like MSP distorts. If you have government intervention of that nature, it distorts. Like the fact that fertilizer subsidy has been kind of kept capped has done very good things for Indian agriculture. So misuse of urea, misuse of potash and all of that has actually come down. So more and more of agricultural resources need to go toward milk, about meat, about vegetables and fruits, about things that we can export. Like what is remarkable is that exports of bananas are shooting up.
Wow.
Marine exports are shooting up. So India, and after a long time of cleaning up our supply of buffalo meat, we are becoming massive exporters of buffalo meat as well. So those are big opportunities. And despite having 12% of the world's arable land and these kind of surpluses, where our productivity keeps going up, but our demand for cereals is not, we are a minuscule part of global agricultural trade.
Right.
And I think there's a big opportunity for farm incomes to grow if we can solve some of these problems. But you're absolutely right. I think the changing nature of food habits in India
Right.
warrants a much deeper transformation of agriculture.
So I'm going to take the last part on a macro. Then I have a few questions very quickly on sector specifics come from our group. First is this whole thing on China plus one. There's a view that there's a large, huge potential for India, but it's not been fully captured. What are your thoughts on that?
I have a somewhat controversial take on this. I think China plus one, in fact, I have this opinion piece which may come out sometime, China equal to China plus one. I mean, so people who have done coding will know, in the for loop, you put n equal to n plus one, and so that's what was the trigger for this. China's, contrary to expectations, China's global share of manufacturing is still going up. So in the last 3-4 years, it has gone up by more than 2.5%. And I think it will keep going up. So, so India does have an opportunity. I mean, there are a lot of global players who do not want the concentration risk in China and are looking for alternatives. But I'm not sure if that is going to be big enough for us to have, to sort of economy to grow. So we have to, given the size of our economy, we are 17-18% global population. We need to rely on a number of things, and I'm not sure China plus one outside of a few sectors like electronics. I think we are doing very well.
Right.
I think in auto comps we are doing very well, but we are doing terribly in footwear. We're doing terribly in apparel. We are doing terribly in solar, partly because China is so dominant and they just
Correct.
keep playing around with numbers.
Different one.
So I don't think that opportunity is as big as what the headlines make it out to be. Even something like the production-linked incentive schemes. Frankly, if you look at the total money being spent, fiscal resources being deployed in PLI schemes, over 7-8 years, 2.2 trillion rupees, right?
Okay.
It was 0.7% of last year's GDP, and it will be disbursed over 7-8 years. So in no year is it going to be more than 0.1% of GDP. How much impact can it have? And in fact, if you ask people in the government who designed it, they say, well, it was never meant to have macroeconomic impact.
Okay.
It was supposed to be very selective, like in electronics, in renewable energy, in food processing, and so there's specific sectors where intervention was needed, technical textiles. So, so I think this China plus one, in terms of the impact it can have on the overall economy of India, is a bit overblown. I would think that, let's put it another way, and there was a debate I was having someone with on this product nation thing. As we go from 4 trillion of GDP to 20 trillion of GDP, at some point we will hit 20 trillion, right, sooner than later. And of that 16 trillion of incremental GDP, I don't think more than 1 trillion is going to come from exports or import substitution. The remaining has to come from growing urban infra, building better quality houses, providing goods and services to each other.
Great. I'm going to quickly run you through, ask your thoughts on a few specific sectors, starting with semiconductors. What do you think is the play in semiconductor over the next 3-10 years? Because it's supposed to be very capital intensive. Even the technology we are adopting is not necessarily considered the latest or the cutting edge. The world is investing into it at another level, and you are obviously in some hot seat in some ways.
I'm just asked to evaluate some of these proposals. But see, having seen the industry, so I was, and that's where we met first in Taipei. This industry is a very complex industry. It requires many years of investment. So what we are doing today is, I think, just setting the stage for what may happen 15 years later.
Okay.
So I'm not sort of holding my breath for dramatic change to show up in the next 5 years. Remember that semiconductor manufacturing is going to be absolutely critical, and so we need to have presence. Now, you cannot start with 2 nanometers.
Right.
You have to start with whatever technology
is available.
So you start with 40 and you hope that you go to 28. Right? That's what our first fab is going to do. There's a lot of work to be done on semiconductor packaging, which I think we will do much better at. When most countries really start there and then they slowly move up to the wafer fab base. Remember that wafer fab manufacturing has not returned cost of capital for anyone other than TSMC, Samsung, and Intel till 5 years back. Now even Intel doesn't return cost of capital. The biggest value in semiconductors is in chip design.
Design.
Now, we have 20% of the world's chip design engineers, but we don't have many companies which are owned by Indians. And this is where I think I'm hoping at least a couple of people here who
get inspired and start.
Yeah, so we'll leave their TI and Qualcomm and MediaTek comfort zone and build something for India. But so this is where the presence of the downstream ecosystem is so important. Why is it that there is no big fabulous company from India? Because when you're designing a chip, you need to know what's coming 3 years later.
Right.
So see, you start designing a chip today, ek din mein to hoga nahi.
Correct.
So it will take 12 months, 24 months, sometimes it takes 5 years. So even to know what you will get designed, and then suppose a product is coming out in 2027, you will have to start getting designed into it in 2025, 26.
Right.
And for that, you need to start working, figuring out what is coming in 27 today. Now, if you don't even have downstream industry here, how will you get to know? So you will keep working in some global firm because their sales office and their relationship managers will know. So which is why I think we have an opportunity, and we are starting to see the first rounds of venture capital investing going into Indian fabless companies. That is where I think we have a huge advantage. There are people, engineers, and all of that. But I must say that semiconductor manufacturing is absolutely critical because I think in 15 years' time we should be aspiring to do the more advanced nodes and frankly the progress we made in that. I mean, it almost I get excited and emotional when you see the first proposals that we got in the ISM, and it would make you cry. That you're giving 50% capex subsidy. The states are giving 20-25% capex subsidy, and this is the quality of proposals we get.
Right.
And I remember in Semicon India on a stage I said, boss, at least get the right people in front of us.
Right.
When you're doing angel investing, this is angel investing, you're giving money and billions of dollars on a PPT, right? This is
absolutely.
This is seed capital. So, and you're not even putting the CEO in front of us. There's some random. So, from there to seeing top quality proposals, well thought through, IRRs, scenarios, this, that, maybe they'll still get it wrong.
Look, at least,
there's
no guarantee.
When I met you first, I was used to cover SMIC in China, Grace Semiconductor, Wong. Most of those companies have not covered cost of capital. So it is hard, but I think we have made a lot of progress.
Yeah. So what I'm taking away is that there's a value in itself, and there's a lot of downstream value that can come over the decade. Quick question. I think we will run out of time on that. So the next on Fintech. A lot of Bangalore. I think it's inevitable. The question, Fintech. Entire finance is a regulated industry all over the world. Technology doesn't like regulations. How do you see the whole thing pan out?
So that's a very
and there's a big
one.
need, right? India is a hotbed with the platform.
100%.
You talked of the stack that we have, etc. So
yeah, and see, finance is like the circulatory system of the economy, right? I mean, you need to be able to deliver with fine capillaries, the smallest people who need capital to the largest people who need capital and different types of capital. So I think fintech can solve a lot of problems, and given that we have an edge, right? So this whole India stack. I mean, people think it's becoming overused but as a principle, it's phenomenal. That you have just like network stack. I mean, I'm assuming whenever I come to Bangalore, I assume everyone is a techie, but maybe not. So just like TCP/IP, you have these protocols and you have layers. You can rely on the bottom layer to deliver whatever you have. So these stacks are incredibly powerful. And now that you have so much of data, the algos you can write, the efficiency that you can bring along, the products that you can export, using the training that you get here. I mean, so you are really cutting edge.
Right.
And we have to realize that we are really cutting edge. In 5 years' time, there will be Indian software companies providing financial services to the developed world. Because the developed world doesn't have the kind of stuff we have.
Right.
Now, it is also incredibly important to solve Indian problems, and I think we are solving them.
Yes.
The question you raised was about regulation. I think what the regulator is doing is trying to keep the system safe. And so, the approach they have taken is that we'll have a core, which is why you see that they are very reluctant to give new banking licenses.
Right.
And the existing banks, they are tightening
Tightening them, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah? So every behavior is controlled. So you keep that core, which is where all the balance sheet risk lies, where all the plumbing, the last mile transfer of funds happen, and do all the innovation at the periphery. Now, that throws up new sets of challenges, because then you can't really grow at scale. You can't become really big. But I mean, so even getting to $1 billion, $2 billion, $5 billion market cap, I mean, you may not get to $200 billion market cap, because unless you can get that scale, you won't be able to do that. But to grow from nothing to $2, $5, $10 billion is actually not that bad. So I think the regulator is very, very open to, there is an RBI Innovation Hub. They're starting to provide, I mean, there's a long way to go. See, frankly, I don't want to make it sound like there are no problems to solve. But it is also not that the regulator does not want innovation to happen. In fact, as I think about Aadhaar, I mean, we just ran a workshop about face auth and how KYC costs can be brought down. There are significant efforts in collaborating, a coordination between IRDA and SEBI and RBI in accepting that one guy does KYC, it becomes KYC for everyone. So we need to solve a lot of problems, but I think it is not as averse to innovation as some of the headlines make it sound.
I know, and I know I have more than 18 questions from things which I have not asked, but I'm also sensitive that you might need to have a flight. So with the request that we picture abhi baki hai, and we'll call you back for another session at some point in time to take these and other questions. Thank you so much, Neelkanth, for taking the time out.